Hi all, welcome back to my YouTube channel, Octopus Technologies Private Limited. In previous session, we discussed about what are variables in Java and what are the different types of variables that are available in Java. And also we have seen one small example on local variable. So in today's session, we'll try to discuss about instance variables. So instance variables are those variables that are declared inside the class but outside of the method are called as instance variables. The scope of these variables is like we can access to these variables within the class anywhere but except static methods. So those kind of variables we call them as instance variables. So let's see one small example. So I have written one Java program. So program name I have given it as instance example. Now inside this class, I try to define three variables, A, B, and C. And all of them are of type integer data type. So now if you see, I'm trying to define these variables inside the class, but outside of the methods. So we call them as instance variables. So whenever you define any variables inside the class, we call them as an instance variables. Now if you see, we have just defined the variables, but we haven't stored any values inside these variables. Now in order to store the values inside these variables, I have written one method name I have given it as store. Now in front of this method name, I'm trying to keep a keyword something called as void. Means when the user is going to call to the store method, for the user this method will not return any value. In front of this void keyword, I'm trying to keep an access specifier public. Means this method, it can be called from the same program or it can be called from a different program. Now, after the method name, in the parenthesis brackets, I have taken two arguments. First argument is x and second argument is y. And both of them are of type integer data type. Means when the user is trying to call to the store method, from the user, this method is expecting two inputs and both the inputs should be of type integer data type. For example, let's assume like when I'm trying to call to the store method, I pass two values. First value I'm passing it as 1000 and second value I'm passing it as 500. So 1000 will be stored under x and 500 will be stored under y. Then inside this method, I'm saying a is equal to x. So in Java, always the assignment happens from right hand side to left hand side. So now if you see right hand side, x is an argument which is holding a value called as 1000 and the 1000 will be copied into your variable a. So now a is getting stored with a value called as 1000. Then in next statement, I am saying b is equal to y. Again, right hand side, y is an argument which is holding a value something called as 500 and that 500 will be copied into your b variable. Then I have written one more method name I have given it as sum. Now again in front of this method name, I'm trying to keep a keyword called as void. Means when the user is trying to call to this sum method, for the user this method is not returning any value. Again in front of this void keyword, I'm trying to keep an access specifier public. Means this method can be called from the same program or it can be called from a different program. Now inside this method, I'm saying c is equal to a plus b. So in a, we stored a value called as 1000 and in b, we stored a value something called as 500. So 1000 plus 500, 1500 will be stored back into your c variable. Then in the next statement, whenever you want to print something onto the console, we write a statement called as system.out.println. In double quotes, whatever you keep, that will be printed as it is on the console. So in double quotes, we are trying to say sum of true numbers. And then along with this information, I want to print some additional information. So keeping a plus symbol. And then I said C. Now C is holding a value something called as 1500. So that will be displayed on the console. Similarly, I have written one more method. Method name I have given it as subtraction method. Then in front of this method, again I am trying to keep a keyword called as void. Means when the user is trying to call to this subtract method, for the user, this method is not going to return any value. Then Again, in front of my void keyword, I'm trying to keep an access specifier called as public. Means this method can also be called from the same program, or it can be called from a different program. Now, inside this method, again, I am trying to say C is equal to A minus B. So A is holding a value called as 1000 and B is holding a value something called as 500. So 1000 minus 500. Amount will be 500 will be restored back into your C variable. Then in the next statement, again I am trying to say system.out.println, and in double quotes we are simply trying to say subtraction of two numbers. So that will be printed on the console as it is. Along with this information, I want to print something else. So keeping a plus symbol, and then I specified C. Now C is holding a value called as 500 that will be displayed on the console. Okay guys, now we'll try to see how the exact flow happens when we try to execute this particular program. So normally whenever we try to compile and run your Java program, always the control first comes to the main method. Now inside the main method, the first step what we are trying to do is like we are trying to create an object to our class. So what is your class name? So class name is instance example. So I am trying to say instance example. Reference variable, you can take anything guys. So here I have taken the reference variable name as I is equal to new instance example. So we are trying to create an object to your class. Now whenever we try to create an object to your class, so what all the variables you have inside your class and what all the methods you have inside your class, all the variables and all the methods will be loaded into the memory. Once they gets loaded into the memory, now you know the reference variable name and you know the method. So simply by saying your reference variable dot method name, we can call to the respective methods. So in line number 21, I'm trying to say I dot store method. And if you see the store method, it is expecting two inputs, right? So I am trying to say I dot store, and I am passing first value as 1000 and second value as 500. So from line number 21, the control will transfer to your line number 7 and it starts executing the store method. When it is executing the store method, in X it stores a value something called as 1000 and in Y it stores a value something called as 500. Then inside this method I am saying A is equal to X. So right hand side X is an argument holding a value something called as 1000 that will be copied into your A variable. Similarly, next statement we are trying to say B is equal to Y. Again, right hand side Y is an argument holding a value something called as 500 and that 500 will be copied into your B variable. Now after executing line number 9, there are no more statements to execute inside this method. Means this method got executed completely. So from line number 10, again the control will go back to your main method. So now line number 21 got executed completely. Then in line number 22, I'm trying to say I dot sum. I'm trying to call to the sum method. So from line number 22, the control will transfer to your line number 11 and it starts executing the sum method. Now, inside this method, we are trying to say C is equal to A plus B. So A is holding a value called as 1000 and B is holding a value something called as 500. So 1000 plus 500. 1500 will be stored back into your C. Then next statement, by using this system.out.println statement, we are trying to say sum of two numbers and printing the addition of two numbers. After executing line number 13, there are no more statements to execute, means your entire sum method got executed. So from line number 14, again the control will go back to your main method. Now line number 22 got executed completely. In line number 23, we are trying to say I dot sub. We are trying to call to the subtract method. So from line number 23, again the control will transfer to your line number 15 and it starts executing the subtract method. Now inside this subtract method, we are trying to say C is equal to A minus B. So A is holding a value called as 1000 and B is holding a value something called as 500. So 1000 minus 500, the result will be 500 that will be stored back into your C. Then in the next statement, we are trying to say system.out.println and saying subtraction of two numbers and displaying the C value as 500. Now after executing this statement, there are no more statements to execute. Then your entire subtract method got executed. So after executing this statement, after executing this entire method, there are no more statements to execute. Then the program, then the control will go back to the main method. After executing line number 23, then there are no more statements to execute. Then your program will be terminated safely. Now, if you see, guys, so A, B, and C are instance variables. The scope of these variables is throughout this class, you can access them in any methods, but except static methods. Now, if you see A, B, C variables, we are able to access in store method. We are able to access them in sum method, and we are able to access in subtract method. And if you see, all of them are non-static methods. So instance variables, we can access throughout the class anywhere except static methods. If you try to access them inside static methods, then it will try to give you a compilation error. So just for testing, let's keep one sysout statement. So I'm trying to say system.out.println testing instance variables. So once I say plus A or B or C, then it started giving you the compilation error, right? If you see here, guys, it started giving you the compilation error. So it says cannot make a static reference to the non-static fields. So there is a reason, guys, why we are getting this exception. So we'll try to have a separate session on static variables. So I'll try to explain why we cannot access static variables. Why we cannot access instance variables inside static. Okay, guys, we'll see you in the next session. Sorry, guys, we forgot to execute the program and see the output, right? So let's run and see the output. So let's simply say right click, run as Java application. Now, if you see, it says sum of two numbers as 1500 and subtraction of two numbers as 500. Okay, guys. So you hope you understood the example. Bye-bye. For latest updates on job openings and new upcoming batches, you people can always follow us on our Facebook page, which is Java Online Training. And you people can also follow us on our Instagram page, which is instagram.com/JavaTech. That's it for this session, guys. See you in the next session. Bye-bye.